Well, yesterday wasn't, say, the day after the baseball all-star game. You know, the day after the baseball all-star game, it's like supposedly the worst sports day in the world. There are no games. Baseball is off. Football hasn't started yet. You know, there's nothing going on, supposedly. You know, they have baseball games on, you know, all this. Austin Riley continues his hot start with the Braves, you know. But there was no NBA final, thank goodness. There was no Stanley Cup final. Wah! Both of them tied up. And so I thought the big story yesterday was really, around here, they don't really care about it in Fresno, but around here, Jim Schaus being named the Southern Conference Commissioner effective July 1st. We, of course, had on yesterday Athens Messenger's Jason Arkley, who is the Ohio Bobcats beat writer, and he was good enough to tell us a little bit about Jim Schaus, the new Southern Conference Commissioner, who's been the athletic director at Ohio. And that's what my monologue is about today. Who am I? Why, I'm Marky Billson, your voice of choice for a new generation of Tri-City sports fans. The name of the program, Tri-City Sports, now on 1420 WEMB Sports Radio. What's that? You're driving down 26. You're about ready to go out of range. I don't know. Try jetbroadcasting.live. Try liking 1420 WEMB Sports Radio on Facebook, where you can watch the show on archive, internet permitting. Regardless, we spoke yesterday, of course, to Arkley, Jason Arkley, the beat writer at Ohio, a little bit about him. I mentioned that this show owns the Tri-Cities because it's got the best guests and the hardest hitting opinions. Tomorrow, we're going to talk one-on-one with Jim Schaus, the new Southern Conference Commissioner, because I happen to think the SoCon can go either way. I think it could be a really fine conference that you can win national titles from. Look, I'm convinced that if Bob McKillop can find a way to get Steph Curry the ball against Kansas 10 years ago, or I guess it's 11, 12 now, Davidson wins a national basketball title with Steph Curry. I'm convinced of that. Citadel's played in the College World Series. Well, we've had certainly FCS football championships, that sort of thing. But it's a good mid-major conference. We've seen Coastal Carolina win the College World Series. We've seen Butler go, shot off the rim from winning the national championship. Why not the SoCon? ETSU is the big league team in town. With that, ETSU sometimes plays big league teams. If you can consider Kansas, Jayhawks basketball being big league. I mean, there are those that would say, well, it's not the NBA, but Kansas compete. Kansas is the team that won the national title that year, okay, instead of Davidson. And so this November 19th, it has come out that ETSU is going to play at Kansas. All right. They've done it before. They did it in 92 and nearly beat the Jayhawks before falling 86-83 in a game ETSU trailed 22-0 in. In a most famous game in ETSU history, it's an NCAA tournament game, so it's going to rank ahead of a regular season game, but is easily the loss to Oklahoma in 1989, Mr. Jennings' sophomore year, 1 point to the Sooners, who are ranked number 1, and it almost was the first time that a 16 ever beat a 1. And I hate that game. I've gotten to the point where I hate it, because it's ETSU fans bragging about a loss. I was so happy when UMBC beat Virginia a year ago, because no longer can ETSU say, we almost became the first, almost. I almost became the Los Angeles Lakers beat writer once upon a time. I mean, what about almost? I almost won a 7th grade basketball game at the end, but my shot didn't go through. What is almost? And it really has always bothered me that the most famous ETSU game in history is a loss. But if there was going to be a moral victory loss, I would suggest to you that falling behind at Kansas 22-0, leading late, was probably a better effort than having a 15-point lead and squandering it and saying, Mr. Denny didn't really foul out. He didn't? Really? Come on now. And I would rather have, that, look, this proved that the game wasn't over, that sort of thing, than the most memorable moment in ETSU history being the day that the Buccaneers squandered a 15-point lead. To the number one team, or not. I don't care. Anyway, I mention that because at 1 p.m., my guest is going to be John Schulman. For all our Unicoi County listeners, Mr. Amy Engel. If you don't know, Amy Engel was a great basketball player from Unicoi County who then starred for many years, 4 years at ETSU in the 90s. Now, and John Schulman married her, and they have, I think, 3 kids, and they now live in Huntsville, Alabama, I believe, or outside of Huntsville, because John Schulman is now the head coach of the Division II Alabama Huntsville Chargers. Now, Schulman also was the head coach at Chattanooga for a period of time, led the Mocs to the NCAA tournament. Omar Watad from Science Hill played for him, transferred from Georgetown. That was big. We'll ask you about those things, but really it was Schulman who was on Allen LaForce's staff back in 92. It was the 92-93 season. It was the season after the 4 straight NCAA tournament appearances. And yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that game now that ETSU is going to play Kansas again. And by the way, whatever happened to that return game the Jayhawks were going to make? Did we get them to come back now? What do we punch those holes out in the mini dome, go back to 12,000 seats and have a game there? Come on. Think about this. All right. But we want to talk a little bit about Jim Schaus. He's going to be the SoCon's 9th commissioner. This starts on July 1. And there's some positives and negatives about such a hire. We all talk about they need a better TV deal. Ohio has a good communications department. But does that mean that the AD from the University of Ohio goes and then becomes a great marketer for the SoCon, and all of a sudden the Southern Conference is having, a TV deal with NBCSN or something? I mean, like the Atlantic 10 does. I mean, is that what happens? I'm not sure it does. But the thing is, and a lot of this started before Schaus, but the thing was, Ohio used to be known for losing. Now they're kind of known for winning in the MAC. And they've been bowl eligible 11 straight years, made bowl games the last 10 years, although that's like falling out of bed. But that means that they have winning records. Same thing with hoops. Also before he was at Ohio, he was at Wichita State. He hired Greg Marshall. That's impressive. He was at Wichita. Did I say Ohio State or was it Wichita? Wichita State, the Shockers. Hired Greg Marshall. There's also, though, room for some skepticism about this hire. I was thinking about this. Why an AD? Why not a television executive? Because that's going to bring in the money. It's going to get the better deal, Why not someone from another conference? John Iamarino came from the Northeast Conference. We were talking about, why not a, person in the front office of the ACC or the SEC? Why not a conference commissioner? It was from the Northeast, is where Iamarino came from, but from another, up-and-coming conference. Something like that. And I think the reason why is Brian Nolan, ETSU president, headed up the search committee along with CSS, College Sports Solutions. Now, CSS hired Tom Wistrcill, and I invite you to go through our video archives on a 1420 WEMB Sports Radio Facebook page. You'll be able to find our interview that we did with him. Wistrcill, before he was a TV executive, was the AD at Akron. And here, now, the new, and you see Wistrcill is now the commissioner of the Big Sky Conference. And CSS, who is the search firm that was involved in the SoCon commissioner hire, well, they were involved in the Big Sky Conference commissioner hire. They found a former MAC athletic director. Guess what they found again? A MAC athletic director. This time instead of Akron, from Ohio. I find that kind of interesting. Nolan also is a West Virginia alum. Now let's go back to the ETSU president that headed up the president's search committee and all that. ETSU alum, West Virginia. There's a tie-in. Also, Steve Forbes, ETSU head men's basketball coach. Hey, he was on Greg Marshall's staff. That's where he came to ETSU from. So now wait a minute here. Here's the question I want to ask. Let's say Brian Nolan was up for the chancellorship of Tennessee. Let's say he got that job. Does that mean that Schaus, who obviously has these two ties in with Nolan, is the SoCon commissioner? Was it the Old Boy Network, or was it, this guy wins at Ohio? Hopefully it's the latter. We'll have to wait and see. Here are the challenges that Schaus faces. Number one, SoCon football's undeniably regressed. Everywhere I see, they say fourth best FCS conference, not the top one. I've seen it ranked as low as 7th, by the way. But only 39% of the out-of-conference games are won by the SoCon team. In other words, when the SoCon plays in football, an out-of-conference opponent, and yeah, it might be Tennessee, might be Gardner-Webb, might be Shorter, might be somebody like that. 39% of the time, the SoCon team wins these days. That's the 8th best record of the 11 FCS conferences. Not so good. Actually, I think there are 10, and then there's some FCS independents. So it's not the same football conference it once was. Now, I Marino likely changed the SoCon to being a conference primarily known for football, or to a conference being known for hoops. I think that's good. Last year, Wofford and Furman, both of them were in the top 25. In fact, had Fletcher McGee not choked, Wofford's in the Sweet 16. But the SoCons never had two teams in the NCAAs. And when you don't have that, it makes the regular season that less appealing to watch. Last year, 11 leagues, conferences if you will, got multiple bids of the NCAA tournament. Can Schaus help the SoCon for the first time be one of those conferences in the future? He's been on the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee 3 times. And that's probably the difference between, let's say, the SoCon becoming a Southern Atlantic 10 or just regressing to the Big South or Atlantic Sun standards. More exposure. I mentioned this. When was the last time ETSU was on ESPN? And I can remember them I remember ETSU UNCG games being the Saturday afternoon game on ESPN. Heck, I can remember, although it was a different ESPN and a different sports landscape at the time, I can remember when ETSU played Western Carolina on a Thursday night primetime on ESPN. Now, that was a while back. That was in the 80s, so it's 30 years ago, and there was no ESPN2 then. And yeah, it's not the same parameter, but why aren't more SoCon games on free TV? Why do you got to go to ESPN Plus? I'm to the point where if I want to watch ESPN Plus, or I want to see the ETSU game there, you know what I usually do? I go down to a sports bar. I don't really want to sit in front of my computer, pay $5 a month, keep getting harassed. You'll get our game of the day in baseball season. There's very little on ESPN Plus that I'm all that interested in. You'll get all the archives of 30 for 30. Okay, well, that's something there. But I got to start looking ahead, not in the past, And this is also a league where all of the teams, except actually ETSU and Mercer, are in top 100 markets. Let me ask you this. Kennesaw State, would you invite them into the SoCon to get the Atlanta TV market in and therefore have a better TV deal? Something to think about here. But also, another thing, not just a TV deal to get a better, I think you ought to look at media in general. How do you get the Southern Conference talked about on shows like these? I'm pretty receptive to it. But how do you get the Southern sports talk show host to respect you and talk to you about you? How do you get Roanoke to make sure that there's a beat writer for all the VMI games and to send one out? How do you get the digital platform? Why can't Sanford get any media attention whatsoever in Birmingham? Why does the Citadel's fan base, which is so prominent during the football season, regress to nothing during the basketball season? Speaking of military schools, the VMI situation, this is another thing that the new commissioner is going to have to look at. Folks, the VMI situation is not funny anymore. The Keydets lose a lot in everything. And as such, it really brings down the overall strength of the conference. And I mentioned this before. I mean, they don't even have lights at the football stadium. Think about that. Now, VMI has some positives. For instance, they're in the Roanoke market. Okay? 67th largest in the country. That's not New York. That's not Atlanta. That is top 100. It's not dinky poo. If I'm trying to get a cable package TV deal for the Southern Conference, I say, look, I got 3 teams in the 38th largest market in the country. I got a 67. I got Chattanooga is somewhere around, I think, 80-something or so. Tri-Cities is 102. It used to be 92, but now it's 102. Macon's the smallest. It's 118. But I got Birmingham, which is a quasi-big market, all things considered. I got, the Triad in Greensboro. I've got Charleston. I've got some markets here. Come on. And have some people watching my games. Come on in. And Roanoke brings that. Now, VMI is Lexington. It's not Roanoke. I mean, this team of Roanoke is obviously Virginia Tech, but it's out there, right? And also another reason for Virginia military to be in the SoCon, they have been since 1924. Now, I realize there was about a decade-long hiatus when they were in the Big South, and I'm not really actively saying VMI must be kicked out. No, I'm not that at all. But there is a difference. You know why? One of the reasons why VMI in 1924 joined the Southern Conference, because the year before they beat Tennessee on a gridiron. VMI, they've lost more than they've won, but they've had times where they've been nationally prominent. I mean, ranked in the AP Top 20, not the FCS, not the D1AA poll. I'm talking about the major AP poll. Virginia military football has been ranked in the past. It's been a while, okay? 1957, but I'm telling you, they've had some success in the past. Basketball. VMI was a powerhouse in the mid-70s. They beat Tennessee in the NCAA tournament one year. In fact, they went back-to-back games in the NCAAs, and that's when the NCAAs, I believe, only had 32 teams. They were nationally ranked. The Runnin' Ruse. Hasn't been that way since. Why? Why does, a Bubba Wallace leave for Georgia Tech? Why? How does that stop? The situation isn't hopeless. I mean, in addition to having, some past success, which I spoke of. In fact, my 1 o'clock guest, John Schulman, was for one game the TSU head coach. 1994, he lost to VMI. Bart Belair's had a respectable team then. It's about a 500 team. That doesn't bring the conference in. I realize somebody's got to finish in last place. Why is it always VMI? That's the question. It's not hopeless. Yesterday there was a pitcher by the name of Zach Kent. He was drafted in the 9th round of the baseball draft by the Rangers. Last year, there were 4 Keydets drafted in the MLB free agent draft. I mean, I got SoCon John Hooper. He thinks VMI is going to have the best passing game in the SoCon next year. Why can't they find a kicker with a range of 41 yards? You got to do... Here's the big question. This is what I'd do if I'm the SoCon commissioner. I go right to, and I don't know if they call it a president or a commandant or a chancellor or a grand poobah. I don't know what they call it at VMI, okay? And I don't even know who he is, but I go right to his office and I sit down, and I don't care if he is a military man, I ask him this: how does it help tomorrow's military leaders, which you're producing here at VMI, if they come from a school that is known for doing nothing but losing in sports? How is that helpful to the country? You're producing generals that keep us safe, and you're teaching them it's okay to lose. It's got to stop. And we're not going to, I mean, I would suggest then that's the argument that I make. I mean, I had to write even a letter there and find this one. Okay. How do you make the Southern Conference the place to be? This is the last thing for the new commissioner, Jim Schaus, to look at. And I'm talking about this. Look, I know the SoCon's never going to be the ACC. I know it's never going to be the SEC. But it can have its own identity, and that identity can be very good. Atlantic 10, maybe it's never going to be the Big East or the Big 10. It can still be a pretty good league where you say, you know what, I want to go play at Temple, or I guess they're in the American now, but I want to go play at St. Bonaventure. I want to go play at LaSalle. I want to go play in the Atlantic 10 Conference. They've had good, at UMass, You get in the Southern Conference, I'm going to be pretty, I don't think the students at Furman or Wofford or VMI or the Citadel, I don't think that they go to those schools, they get their diploma and say, boy, I really wish that I had this diploma from the big state school. I mean, debate if anybody, but there's the image of ETSU is where you go if you can't get in UT. I would imagine there's the image of UNCG is the place you go if you can't get into Chapel Hill. But that's not the case at Wofford. That's not the case at even VMI. How did Chattanooga look when David Blackburn, their old AD, was telling everybody, I want that Tennessee AD job? Mocs were beating Tennessee on a hardwood. For that matter, how did it look when Brian Nolan was pursuing the chancellorship at UT? And I realized that, okay, the grass can be greener at other places. Don't get me wrong. And I realized that Tennessee pays more. But let's just go back to Schaus and how he got Greg Marshall at Wichita State. Wichita State would seem to be a basketball program, a good one, but one that the grass would be greener at most other programs until they pay him $3.5 million a year, which is outstanding at a mid-major conference. He's not leaving the Shockers. There was some talk, maybe he'd be a UCLA coach. And then they looked at that $3.5 million price tag and they said, we can probably find a coach just as good that won't cost as much. Similarly, Steve Forbes, he makes $650,000 a year. Not enough to keep Arkansas away where he interviewed, but enough to keep UTEP away. That wasn't always the case at ETSU. Now, we can discuss with Mike Young, who's from Southwest Virginia, and he's had the peak of his coaching career, and he's only going to get one chance, and really he's underpaid at Wofford, and he's going to get 10 times more the money at Virginia Tech. And even if he wasn't going to get 10 times more the money, if Virginia Tech wanted you and you're the Wofford coach, you're probably listening. Even if the money is about the same. I get that. However, if the Wofford coach makes about what Steve Forbes does, which he didn't, Mike Young didn't, that'll keep a lot of potential suitors away. And so can Schaus, who, hired Greg Marshall, who's paid as well as anyone, can he convince the other SoCon schools to hire coaches and pay them so that they stay and it becomes the place to be, the Southern Conference, with an identity all its own? And it's not, you'll never be Tennessee. No, you don't have to be Tennessee. Okay, Virginia Tech will never be Virginia. Doesn't have to be. They're Virginia Tech. You see? Okay. Now, if he can do that, if he can get the conference to pay the coaches and all that, conference will grow. And if not, the odds are, just continue along the path, and that path might actually be regression. So we shall see what path that takes. Hey, I want to thank you for listening to me. I know that was a longer monologue than I normally do. But I'll be asking Jim Schaus some of those questions tomorrow at 12:30. I'll be asking John Schulman some questions at 1 p.m. today, and I'll be talking about a lot of things. Hey, the SEC football odds are out, national championship odds are out, Heisman Trophy odds are out, and a lot of things. Baseball draft, what happened in baseball last night, Tri-Cities Sports Now.
I know. You're actually a little